So today is a historical event. We just saw Prime Minister Kishida announce the cabinet reshuffle. And what is interesting about this particular cabinet reshuffle is in the timing. Its implications for the Liberal Democratic Party and in particular the Abe faction, and more broadly, the impact on the Kishida government and its policies. Dan Harada, representative director of the Nagatacho Forum and expert on Japanese politics, joins us today to share his first impressions and overview of this event. Dan, this is an unprecedented change and a bold move for Prime Minister Kishida. The cabinet reshuffle before the Obon holiday is largely unheard of. Why was this sudden change made and announced last Friday when it was thought to occur early next month?
Well, essentially, Kishida-san wants to take the spotlight of the church problem. So initially, the cabinet was supposed to be reshuffled at the beginning of next month, but as the climate is getting hotter and hotter about the church, he made what I think is a right move and decisively went ahead much sooner than expected.
Yes, there's many events that are mentioned by the news that indicate the timing and reasoning. We recently see kind of a dip in the Kishida administration's ratings, and their polling has dropped since the upper house election on July 10th. Could this be one of the key reasons why this change was made so suddenly?
Definitely, yes. Definitely, yes.
Cabinet reshuffles are generally seen to be a way to boost an administration's kind of polling. So this could be a key area to look at in addition to the surge in COVID-19 numbers recently. Aside from this, there are kind of elephants in the room, such as the Abe faction. With the recent passing of former Prime Minister Abe, the assassination, should I say, there is kind of a power vacuum that has occurred in his faction. And with a lack of a plan for leadership succession, there seems to be a little bit of turmoil within the faction, the largest faction, commonly referred to as the Abe faction, with 97 Diet members. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes with the Abe faction and how might this be important to this sudden change?
Former Prime Minister Abe had repeatedly mentioned 4 potential candidates to succeed him as a head of a faction. And with the change in the cabinet now, the number of 4 has dropped down to 3. Shimomura-san has bowed out of the race, and that's an important factor not only within the faction itself, but within the party.
And we would be, we need to mention also what's going on with the Unification Church. This seems like a key kind of issue that has drawn a lot of attention of the media and the public, and is also affecting issues such as polling. Can you tell us a little bit about the Unification Church and its implications to this cabinet reshuffle, and why the importance of removing the cabinet ministers from key positions with this shuffle?
Well, it's a bombshell. It hasn't exploded yet, and it may not explode. But for instance, this morning, one of the most prominent weekly in the country had 15-page article on the church, and essentially, let's call a spade Mr. Abe. Okay, and Mr. Abe meaning also the entire faction, and the entire faction mean also the entire party as a whole. It's very, very big issue. And when the dust will have settled, the dust meaning because of the reshuffle will have settled, the issue of the church will not have settled. You have armies of lawyers who are preparing suits against the church. It's an enormous thing. So again, I repeat, Kishida-san was absolutely right in trying to take some of the heat off the issue. But after the vacation starts tomorrow and so on, maybe the heat will still be going on. It's a major issue.
And this is in light of the fact that there is controversy over the planned Abe's state funeral on the 27th of this month. Can you speak a little bit on that and perhaps why this current change has perhaps drawn attention away from the controversy there?
Well, Kishida-san was not known to make quick decisions. He made two quick decisions. The first one is to have a reshuffle now, and the second one was to have a state funeral for Abe-san. All the opinion polls say that about 70% of the nation are against it. And now we basically stuck with it. I mean, we can't, since the announcement was made, you can't change it overnight. But it's a major issue.
And generally speaking, a change in the minister does not necessarily mean a change in kind of party policy. But what changes might we expect in policy moving forward based on this reshuffle?
Well, no, you just said it. I mean, you change the minister doesn't mean you change the policy. The policy is made by the ministry and by the party. Whoever is at the head of it doesn't change anything.
So what significant changes might we anticipate based on this reshuffle?
I think that several issues having to do with people. First of all, Suga-san, former prime minister, who is definitely not a friend of Kishida-san. It was rumored that he would come into the cabinet. That was, as I said many times, absolutely idiotic to think that, but still, now he is not. And that is one element that you have to look at from this reshuffled. Second one was Fukuda-san. Fukuda-san has disappeared from the scene, and this is an important thing. Another thing is, as I said earlier, is Shimomura-san has now vanished from this reshuffle and from the eventually leading the Abe group, the Abe faction, the Abe team.
Great. Let us take a deeper look into each of the individuals. We've actually prepared a bit of a graphic that we would like to dive into in more depth. So please bear with me as I this on the screen. Can you see the full screen?
Yes.
Great. So here we have kind of the new landscape of the cabinet, in addition to a few key party positions. And we'd like to dive into a few of the individuals in more depth and discuss some of the implications here for the faction and the party. Starting off, are there any kind of key areas that you would like to highlight, Dan?
Not really. The party top two posts, except obviously Kishida-san. In other words, Aso-san and Motegi-san stay where they are, and that's some element of continuity. The important thing is let's call it the promotion of Hagiuda-san. Now, Hagiuda-san definitely wanted to keep his position as a member of the cabinet. And because Hagiuda-san, I apologize for saying that about him, he's a little church tainted. He was removed to the party because if the party doesn't need to be tainted as it was before. So Hagiuda-san is a newcomer in the lineup, and it's definitely a very important position for him. The others are less important. They are changing the chairs, the musical chairs, but by and large, the party lineup hasn't changed very substantially.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit about, the current leadership? We see obviously Prime Minister Kishida, the Secretary General Motegi, and Vice President of the LDP also staying in power. Is this going to be kind of the power base moving forward? And what implications might we draw from the Abe faction?
Well, the Abe faction is a big unknown. The thing, and I repeat, the thing that we have learned from this reshuffle is Shimomura-san is out, but the other three are still there. Hagiuda-san is in the party, the other two are in the cabinet, and we are not any nearer to solving out who's going to be number one in the faction. And it is important because the faction is almost twice as big as the next one. Talking about 97 people versus 52 or 53.
Yes, so we'll get into this in a moment, but based on this analysis with Chief Cabinet Secretary Matsuno, Policy Research Council Chair Hagiuda, and Minister of Economy, Trade, and Industry Nishimura, is that kind of what you would expect to see in terms of perhaps the future power struggle within the Abe faction?
Yes, pretty much so. Pretty much so.
And what might we gather from the other appointments or the mix of different factions jockeying for kind of positions in the cabinet?
Essentially, nothing much has been changed. I mean, Motegi faction has gone down by one in the cabinet post, and Aso-san has gone up by one. But the rest of the thing is the lineup has not changed very significantly.
But we see a lot of new appointments. We see a few members continuing. We see 2 women within the cabinet. Are there any kind of significant changes that you would like to point to?
Not really, no. I focus on the 3, and Nishimura-san, Hagiuda-san, and Matsuno, the 3 of successors, quote unquote, to Abe-san. The other appointments are it's a balanced thing. It is a pretty standard reshuffle. And I think there are basically no mistakes made by Kishida-san.
Can we look at a few of the more interesting picks? For example, we noticed that a former rival to Prime Minister Kishida in the LDP presidential race last September is Kono Taro. And he was previously the head of the public relations headquarters in the LDP. Now he has been pegged for the digital minister, a position that's previously been held by Minister Hirai, who he has worked with as administrative reform minister. Now he's taking on this role. What is the significance of Kono Taro taking on this position?
I think that it has to do with Suga-san, who probably put his foot down and asked in no uncertain terms that Kono-san be brought up there. Suga-san definitely during the race was supporting Kono-san, and I think he has again supported him here. The position for Kono-san is why not? I mean, he is in the cabinet. That's essentially what counts.
He was also quite a popular figure in the past. Perhaps this could be a move to increase polling or for him to perhaps come back into the limelight.
Yes, come back into the light. Yes, absolutely. I mean, he's a cabinet minister. Whereas, as you just said yourself, he had a little minor post, but in the party. Now it's a big step up for him.
And what of Takaichi Sanae? So she is also the Minister of Economic Security. She's an independent. What is the significance of her taking on this role as opposed to being the Policy Research Council chair previously?
That's a little different to say, but she was a party post, and now she's in government. And my question is, why is Fukuda-san, who was next to her in the party, why is he completely out? And that has some implications for the Abe faction.
Yes, she was well known to be supported by former Prime Minister Abe. She was also a rival to Prime Minister Kishida in the previous race. Is this move by bringing some of his former rivals closer? Is this a political play by Kishida to keep his potential rivals closer rather than as potential enemies?
No, probably. I don't think so. It happens really to be a coincidence that she is there. But again, I repeat, what is interesting is that she is in and Fukuda-san is not in.
Okay. And what of the appointments that have been repeated? For example, we see Foreign Minister Hayashi maintaining his post, as well as the Economic Revitalization Minister Yamagiwa keeping his post. Can you talk a little bit about some of the repeat ministers and staying in their posts and what the significance might be here?
Well, for Hayashi-san, it was some people thought that he's too pro-Chinese, and they had hinted that maybe he should be replaced, but he stays in. He is heir apparent to Kishida-san, is number 2 in the faction, and we go on. I think it's what is interesting is Hamada-san, who was Minister for Defense and who is again Minister for Defense, who is not a faction man, is unaffiliated. And I think it's interesting that he was chosen. He has the experience, he's quite knowledgeable in military matters, and I think it's a good appointment, a tribute to Mr. Kishida.
Can we expect any changes in defense posture? Or he was previously as well a defense minister, maybe 12 years ago under the Aso administration. Is there any significance to that kind of continuity?
Yes, I mean, we're gonna announce within the year the national defense posture. And because he was already a minister, because he's knowledgeable in the matters, I think it's the right appointment and at the right time. And again, a sort of tribute to Kishida-san's way of maneuvering and balancing the act and keeping things under control. I think Hamada-san is an important appointment.
It's also a fun fact that he was a previous member of the Geens, the Diet member band, alongside Foreign Minister Hayashi. So that's an interesting pick in terms of that combination of perhaps the 2 + 2 in the future. They have a somewhat of a relationship.
Yes, indeed. You're perfectly right.
Are there any other members that you would like to highlight in this this initial overview? I mean, we have the Minister of Infrastructure being a Komeito party man, which is a common pick within this reshuffle. Is there anything of note that you might want to bring to the table?
probably I'm going back to the Abe faction, the appointment of Nishimura-san. Okay. Other than that, not really. I think the appointment of Saito, the reappointment of Saito-san is perfectly logical, and I think it's a good cabinet. It's well balanced. There are people who know what they're talking about. I think it's a tribute to Kishida-san.
Yes, Minister Nishimura was the previous Minister of Economic Revitalization. He's also of the same faction as Policy Research Council Chair Hagiuda. So the continuity we can expect will be there for METI.
Absolutely.
An interesting one might be this one of the younger cabinet member picks in the minister in charge of declining birth rate, Mr. Ogura from the Nikai faction.
Yes, I mean, I think he's the youngest in the cabinet. He succeeds Noda-san, who was removed because she was tainted with the church. I know him well. He's quite knowledgeable about, let's say, medical affairs, and he belongs to the Nikai faction. He's one of the two of the Nikai faction. Nikai faction as two. It is well balanced, and Ogura-san is welcome. He's competent to do for the job.
Great. Next, I'd like to move on into kind of the party mix. We have here kind of your favored look of the overview of different factions within the LDP and kind of telling us a little bit about what this power balance might mean. So on the left-hand side, we have the factions, and we have the size or the number of Diet members within those factions, and a comparison between the cabinet posts before the reshuffle and after the reshuffle, which occurred today. Are there any points here that you would like to point to, Dan?
No, I repeat again, it's a well-balanced reshuffle, not only the cabinet, but the party position. Moriyama-san is too small to have any cabinet post, but on the other hand, he has an important party post. He's in charge of the election, particularly as we are coming up to change the gerrymandering from so-called 10 to 10. And he's there, and it's well balanced.
Yeah, not much changed. It looks like when
compared. Not much change. Actually, very little change, but it's well balanced.
Yeah, some were suspecting perhaps a reduction of those in the Abe faction due to perhaps the inner turmoil, but the size of their faction perhaps speaks for itself.
It would have been very difficult for Kishida-san in the current environment to reduce the number of cabinet posts that the Abe faction had. It would have been very, very delicate. And I think he was right to keep things as they were. Now, you can argue that 4 cabinet posts with 97 and 3 cabinet posts for 54, there is an imbalance, but that's not the point. The imbalance existed before the reshuffle. So Kishida-san has only done, going on to do the same thing as was done before. I think it's correct move for him. Great.
So I'm going to stop sharing the slides now, and I'd like to kind of go into final thoughts. This is just a initial overview, initial analysis and review of the changes, and we'd like to actually follow up with this with a deeper analysis. Are there any kind of final thoughts from you, Dan, in terms of the cabinet reshuffle that's occurred, or what we might expect going into Obon, following Obon? What might we expect? What might we see from the Kishida administration?
Well, I'm worried that once the cabinet has been reshuffled, then probably we're going to go back with a church problem. That is definitely my worries.
So we can expect to continue seeing the Unification Church being brought up in the news, and perhaps this being a continuing political scandal to be built upon.
Absolutely, I think so. You have teams of lawyers who are preparing lawsuits for the plaintiffs whose money was taken. Actually, I mean, the assassin of Mr. Abe is pretty typical. Okay, the church, he thinks, and that's probably at the end of the day is right, the church stole his family's wealth. And I mean, his mother is not the only one. There are thousands of them. And unfortunately, Abe-san was at the center of it.
And perhaps on a more positive note, though, do you see any kind of promise from Prime Minister Kishida making this kind of bold move? It's kind of a perhaps coming out of his shell, maybe his coming out party, in making this kind of bold decision.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, Kishida-san was tentative, no decisions made, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, he has with very good timing to deflect the church problem and went ahead a month earlier than was expected. I definitely think he has very good marks on that, on the timing also, and as I said earlier, on the makeup of the party post and the cabinet. But I'm worried once the brouhaha of the ministers, and today we are talking about the ministers, but in the days that are coming, we're talking about the vice ministers, the secretary, and blah, blah, blah. But when all that have subsided, the church probably will not have subsided. And that's what I'm worried about.
Yes, exactly. I think this is something that we will continue needing to talk about and analyze. And we really look forward to continuing discussing this topic with you, Dan.
Perfect. I'm perfectly willing.
Great. So on that note, as you know, many of our audience are also kind of business professionals and looking for support, perhaps in understanding Japanese politics and policy. What are some kind of key takeaways that we might be able to share with them in maybe areas of promise or looking forward in terms of engagements or understanding Japanese politics as a whole?
That's a tough question. Essentially, I mean, let's look at it this way. A new minister does not mean a new policy. The function of a minister is essentially to get a bigger share of the budget, of the overall budget for his ministry. That doesn't mean any changes in policies. I understand what you want me to say, and I'm not absolutely certain. It's not no great changes in policies as a whole. What you may want to look at is the defense problem. Now we have already decided to increase the defense as a portion of the budget, and there might be some changes in policies. The situation with China is getting worse and worse, and we have to beef up the defense. That's something where I would be looking at.
Great. Thank you for your final thoughts, Dan. This is an area that we will continue to monitor and can be difficult to navigate, but we do have the finger on the pulse, and we will continue to share our updates on Japanese politics. We look forward to continuing engaging with you and hearing your opinion on these matters as we move forward. If you're interested in learning more, please consider subscribing to our website. Or our mailing list. We do share regular updates on this, and we will have future events. We will also share these on our social media channels such as LinkedIn and YouTube in the following weeks. So we're looking forward to sharing some more exciting announcements. Japanese politics is always an interesting topic, and we look forward to discussing this further with you, Dan, now and in the future.
So do I. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And with that, we will close. This is, again, just a teaser. We will have a follow-up event in the near future to analyze deeper once the dust settles. Thank you very much. Goodbye.